Today we are starting with chapter 14, which is titled Coordination and Control. And in this chapter, we'll be talking about how the body coordinates different aspects or parameters, right? Or stimuli. Stimuli is something that is sensed and controls the changes that need to be brought about. Right, so an example of this is when you are running low on energy, right? Or you are exercising. So you're exercising and your muscles need more energy than they normally would. Your energy demand increases. Right? We've already done aerobic respirations. You know that energy, right? To get that energy, you need two things. You need glucose and you need oxygen. And so what the body does is it increases the rate of the breathing rate. It increases the blood flow, and it also converts, like in if required, it converts stored glycogen to glucose. Right? When you're breathing more, you're getting more oxygen. When the blood flow is higher, then the supply of oxygen and glucose to the muscles will be faster.
Our body stores sugar in the form of glycogen.
Yes.
Okay.
Right? And with these two factors, when they reach the muscle, right, you're going to have more aerobic respiration. And therefore more energy. Now, right, this coordination, right, breathing is done in the lungs, right, blood flow is obviously related to the heart and the vessels, right, glycogen is primarily stored in the liver. There is a store of glucose within the muscles themselves, right? So that as well, and you can see that the different organs and different responses need to be coordinated, right, to meet the requirement of the situation, right? And it needs to be controlled. How much should the breathing rate go up? How much should the blood flow go up? Right? Do we need to convert all the glycogen to glucose immediately? Right? So the blood glucose level goes up. Like, do we need to convert all of it? Do we need to convert some of it? And so that control is also there. There are two main control centers in the body. The first is called nervous control, which is, the main regulator for that is the brain, right? The nervous system is the nervous control, nervous system, and the second is the endocrine system, which is basically the release of hormones into the blood, right? Which go and have an effect. The part of the body where an effect is produced is called an effector. Right, whether that effect is being produced by the nervous system or the endocrine system.
The endocrine system is present like everywhere or at like a certain point.
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Endocrine system is like present everywhere in our body or like at a certain point.
No, it's certain parts, right? So there's certain glands, such as the adrenal gland that releases adrenaline, right? Or the pituitary gland in the brain.
So like it's also in our throat or not?
Huh?
It's also in our throat or not?
It's also what?
In our throat, like
In our throat.
yeah,
The thyroid gland, yes,
yeah.
right? So that releases a different hormone, right? It releases the thyroid hormone, if that's what it's called,
Yeah.
right? Now, since you asked,
It it includes all the hormones. Huh?
huh?
It includes all our hormones,
Yes,
endocrine system.
not all the gland system. That's what the endocrine glands are different from the glands, other glands. So the endocrine glands, right, are called ductless. So they do not have any tube that is connecting them to where they want to release the hormone. They do not have a tube. Okay, and secondly, right, they release the hormone directly into the blood. So, I mean, saying directly into the blood, they release it they secrete the hormone into the tissue fluid surrounding the cells of the gland, and then it travels, like diffuses through the tissue fluid, through the wall of the capillary and into the blood. But so to speak, direct, because the capillary network is very dense throughout the body, right? It reaches almost every cell, and so we just say it releases hormones directly into the blood. Why are they different? Because regular glands, for example, right, salivary glands, they're in your mouth and they release saliva, right? For example, for one thing, they have a duct, right? So there is some sort of tube or some sort of passage that is from where the saliva is going to come. And secondly, it's coming into your mouth. It's not going into the blood.
Saliva is also like hormone.
Hmm?
So saliva is also a hormone.
No, it's not. That's what I'm saying, right?
Okay.
Saliva is not a hormone.
If like hormones are released directly into our blood, so doesn't that affect our blood?
Your voice is really breaking up, Beta. Could you repeat that?
Uh, if like a gland releases hormones directly into the blood, like doesn't that make our blood impure or something?
That doesn't make blood what?
Uh, impure or like affect our blood?
It's not about impurity. It's like the hormone isn't a bad thing. Like there's already so much stuff in your blood. We've talked about the components of blood, right? There are
Yeah.
proteins, there are other chemicals. Part of those chemicals are hormones, right? For example, insulin.
Okay.
right? So the pancreas, and within the pancreas, you have a group of cells called the islets of Langerhans, right? This is a gland. It releases the hormone insulin, which converts glucose to glycogen, right? And it lowers the blood glucose level, right? Then you've
Like,
got
why do some people
then you've got
like why do
adrenal.
some people take
Huh?
sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Like why do some people take insulin when they have
Okay.
like
So so
blood
so
pressure or
so we're really jumping ahead, but the reason why some people take insulin is because the pancreas, the islets of Langerhans are not producing insulin at all. Like no insulin is being produced, so there's something wrong with their gland, or it is not produced in sufficient quantities. And so when they eat something, we know that the food we eat has much more energy than we need at the moment, right?
yeah,
And so the body stores that energy in the form of glycogen or in the form of fats, right? But for that, the sugar, for example, the carbohydrate first goes into the blood, and then it goes into the liver, and then it's converted. The hormone insulin goes and does its job, right? The problem is with the people who take insulin, right? Obviously, they have the condition called diabetes. So, and so they're not producing enough insulin, or they're not producing insulin at all. And so in that case, they are unable to convert the glucose in the blood to glycogen or to fat. And so what happens is that the blood glucose concentration remains very high, and that has obviously negative effects. And so they take artificial insulin, right, which does the same job. And so they need to take it sometime around their meal to bring the level down into a normal controllable range. And they can't go around snacking or eating or just having fun in terms of consumption of food, like nutrition. They have to be very careful. Okay.
and like the insulins that also affect their health as well.
Does insulin affect their health? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Like the artificial insulin that they're taking?
yes,
uh I mean, it could. I mean, it the you know the mainstream answer is that it doesn't. It helps, but you know you like, it could possibly. I'd say that, but normally it doesn't.
mhm,
Right? It could be that however the insulin is made, maybe the body isn't accepting it, or there's a reaction or something else. There's always the possibility. Like any medicine that you take, it is not 100% safe, right? So even the most common medicine, there can be side effects to it, even though they're very rare. But there is the possibility of having an adverse effect to any medicine you're taking, right? Some medicines are more harsh than others, but yeah. So do you understand, like, right, not all glands are endocrine glands, not everything that's secreted is a hormone, right? So the glands such as the salivary glands, they secrete saliva. It is not a hormone, right? This is not an endocrine gland. Salivary glands are not endocrine glands, right? The pancreas is an endocrine gland in the sense that it secretes insulin for that, right? Okay, so we did jump a bit ahead. So what we're going to talk about first is nervous control. So the nervous system is made up of two parts, right? The first part is called the CNS, or central nervous system. And this consists of the brain and the spinal cord. The other is called the PNS, or the peripheral nervous system. Right, and this consists of the nerves themselves, right? The nerves outside the brain and spinal cord. Now, what all of these are, we'll talk about. So, nerves are, right? I mean, in fact, before going to nerves, we're going to talk about, right, the cells that make up the nervous system. They're called neurons or nerve cells. Right? And what they do is that they carry electrical impulses, right, between the CNS, PNS, right, the receptor, and the effector. So we'll talk about all of that. Right, so the nerve impulses are, right, signals or messages that are transferred between all of these nerves. Okay, so for example, muscle contraction or stimulating a gland to produce a certain enzyme or a hormone. A signal is sent along a nerve cell or a neuron to the muscle, right, which makes it contract. So as I mentioned, right, glands and muscles are called effectors because they act when they receive an impulse. Are effectors, they act when they receive an impulse. Okay, so again, examples could be the secretion of saliva in your mouth, or the contraction of a muscle, or something else. So the impulses can be either sensory, right, which means something is sensed, something is detected, there's a stimulus, right? Something is sensed or detected, and that impulse is carried from the receptor to the central nervous system. Right? And then we've already talked about the other one. The other impulse is a motor impulse. right, where the impulse goes from the nervous system to the effector.
Okay. I have another question.
Hmm?
I have a question. It might not be related to the topic, but why do some people get anxiety?
Your voice is completely breaking up, Alec. Could you try speaking slowly, loudly, something?
Yeah. Like, why do some people get anxiety?
Why do some people get anxiety? There are many, many
Yeah.
reasons for anxiety.
Like, is it related to the nervous system part?
It is. It is related to the nervous system. But the reasons are many and the reaction is complex. Right? So I won't be going to details for that over here, but yes, it's not a simple answer that this happens. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got two types of impulses called the sensory impulse and the motor impulse. I mentioned the central nervous system and the right peripheral nervous system. Now, carrying these impulses, as we mentioned, are the cells, the neurons, these guys, right? They're the ones carrying the impulses. So let's talk about the neurons. There are three types of neurons. One are the sensory neurons, and so you can guess that the sensory neurons carry the sensory impulse. Right? And these carry impulses from sense organs to the central nervous system. Sorry. Sense organs, for example, the eyes, we'll talk about the eyes. Right? It's not necessarily only the external sense organs, right? The example I gave in the beginning, right? So there also sensors within the body to detect internal changes. So the muscles needing more energy is an internal change. And so that is also detected. The signal is sent to the central nervous system, right? So that is also sent by sensory neurons. It is a sensory impulse, right? So not necessarily only the sense organs, right? From receptors. These receptors can be external, like the sense organs, or they can be internal. And they carry it to the central nervous system. Right, then you've got the motor neurons, which again, right, are the ones carrying the motor impulse. They're also called the effector neurons because they carry the impulse from the central nervous system to the effectors. Right, which means the muscles or the glands. And then you've got something called the relay neuron. Right, it's also called the connector or the multipolar neuron. So connector or multipolar neuron. Right, so this is a different neuron. It's neither the sensory or the motor neuron, and what they do is that they make connections within the central nervous system. right? They make connections between different neurons. Within the central nervous system, right? And then there's something, there are junctions where the neurons, right, connect. And those are called synapses. We'll talk about synapses later. Just mentioning that. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. So, what is the structure of uh, the neurons, right? So, they have a general structure and then they've got like particular structures depending on what types we're talking about. So, go to a new page and I'll put this in here. So, I'll just move that to the side. Okay. That's obviously from the book.
So all the neurons have the same structure.
Huh?
So all the neurons have the same structure.
No, they don't. The general features of a neuron, right? So they all have a cell body, right? Which is where the nucleus is present, right? The nucleus and the surrounding cytoplasm. Now, where it is, that depends on the type of neuron, right? For a sensory neuron, as you can see in this one, right, the cell body is right near the central nervous system. So this is the receptor, the sensory receptor in the skin. The impulse is traveling upwards in this case, and the cell body is somewhere close to where the impulse will reach and transfer to a different neuron. For a motor neuron, right, the motor neuron, the cell body is within the central nervous system. In fact, right, the cell bodies of the neurons are always, so the cell bodies, whatever type of neuron it is, are always within the central nervous system, which means they're either in the brain or they're in the spinal cord. Right? So over here with the motor neuron, you're starting with the cell body and then it's going down all the way to the muscle. Right? The sensory neuron, as you can see. So that's one feature of neurons.
So these neurons are attached with the tissues and the muscles.
Yes, so they are attached to they're either the muscles or the glands or wherever an effect needs to be produced, or wherever the sense or the receptor is.
Okay. So
Okay,
like these neurons are also in our hands.
you have neurons all over your body,
Okay.
right? The place where you don't have a neuron is, for example, your hair. Your hair does not have neurons. The dead part of your nail, the white part of your nail, does not have a that does not have neurons, so you don't feel anything over there. Okay, your hair, if a fly is sitting on your head, you won't notice it. Why? Because your hair doesn't have neurons. But all the living part of your body, the skin, which is skin and everything, right? It has neurons, right? Your teeth, the outer coating of your teeth, the enamel, that doesn't have neurons. The neurons are inside the teeth, right? And so you only feel something when pressure is applied or something, is in contact with the nerves inside, right? If it's just something that is, for example, right, you just take the tip of your nail and you touch the surface of your teeth, you won't feel anything. You know you're doing it because you are doing it, but in terms of sensation, you won't feel anything. Right? So you can try that.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing is the cell body, which has the nucleus. Right. So as you can see, obviously that the the neurons are not shaped like the kind of cells that we studied earlier, although we did come across this way back in chapter 1 when we were talking about different types of cells and tissues and everything. So they did give a picture of the neuron, right? It's a very different kind of cell, right? This whole thing is one cell, this whole thing, right? Okay. And the second thing are dendrites. What are dendrites? As you can see in the image, uh, they are they are fibers which branch from the cell body to make contact with other neurons. Right, so you can see in the image the dendrites, and then you've got this long filament, right? This entire thing, this long filament, right? That is made up of cytoplasm from the cell. It's made of cytoplasm, and it is covered by a layer.
Filament is the tail-like part of the neuron.
Hmm? Could you repeat that?
Filament is the tail-like part of the neuron.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get that. Could you repeat it slowly and loudly?
Filament is the tail-like part of the neuron.
Yes, yes. The long, thin, thread-like, right? This is the filament is also called the nerve fiber, as you can see in the illustration. Okay. So the cell body is almost always in the central nervous system, so either the brain or right. The nerve fiber. Now don't confuse the terms. The nerve fibers are right that they make up the peripheral nervous system, and they are found in nerves. What are nerves? They are collections or bundles of nerve fibers. So when I say nerve, it means that many of these filaments are bundled together, and they can be both sensory and motor. So it's not like you only have one, like it's a motor nerve or it's a sensory nerve. Normally in a nerve, you've got both of them, right? And they can carry many different impulses to different, places, and right, that way. Now, within a nerve fiber, not a nerve, a nerve is a collection or bundle of nerve fibers. Within a nerve fiber, the impulse moves in one direction only. So that direction we've talked about, right? For sensory neurons, it carries the impulse from the sense organ to the central nervous system. So that's one direction. Motor neurons from the central nervous system to the effector. That's what. So it, right, within a nerve fiber, whichever way it's going, it only and always carries the impulse in one direction. It never goes the other way. So if we take a look over here, for the sensory, it's going from the receptor to the central nervous system. The direction that's shown by the arrow, it always travels in that direction. It does not ever go in the opposite direction. And for the motor neuron, going from the cell body towards the effector, and that is the direction of travel of impulse for a motor neuron. It never goes in the opposite direction, never goes from the muscle to the cell body. Okay, so it's always unidirectional.
And why do sensory neuron and motor neuron have structure from one another?
Huh?
Why do sensory neuron and motor neuron have different structure from one another?
Right. So the thing is that, right, the motor neurons, right, it's connected to relay neurons, and so, right, sensory neurons, they detect a sensation from some part of the body, like a signal from some part of the body. They take it to the central nervous system, and then it may be necessary to send that signal to various parts of the central nervous. Like I said, right, if the muscle needs more energy, then that sense that signal is detected, it's sent to the brain, right? It needs to send that signal to many parts. You need to increase the rate of breathing, you need to increase the blood flow, you need to convert glycogen to glucose, right? And so that makes several connections to different other types of neurons, relay neurons and motor neurons. And so, right, that's one thing. The cell body is here, right? The for the motor neuron, the cell body has connections coming in from many different places. So it's possible that, for example, for one muscle to contract, many different signals are being received. For example, right, you have your hand close to something that's hot. So not only are you seeing that the object is hot, you are feeling on your skin that the object is hot. So you are receiving signals from different sense organs coming to your brain that your hand is close to something that's hot. And so those signals from different sense organs are being received by the motor neurons. So connections from different many other uh, neurons from other nerve fibers, and they're connecting, and they're all going to the muscles in your hand, right? And so that will cause a reflex action, which we'll talk about, right? For you to move your hand away from the hot object.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, so some nerve fibers are very long. They could be up to 1 meter long. They could travel all the way from the brain to the tip of your toe in your leg, right? A single nerve fiber. So some of them can be very long, others are shorter, right? So they're different lengths. Next up, with the time we have left, can we cover synapses? I think we can. Let's talk about synapses, and then tomorrow we'll talk about the reflex part, which I just mentioned, like the reflex response. So the synapse is the junction where neurons connect with neurons, right? A junction between two neurons, right? So each neuron that is connecting to the next neuron has a synapse. So if there are 10 neurons connecting, right? Even in this case, again going back over here, you see all these dendrites, right? This is where the neurons are making connections. So each one of these has a different synapse. Okay, each one of these will have a different synapse. Right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? Each one of these is a synapse.
Then at the end of that helps.
Come again. Could you repeat that? They are at the end of dendrites. Yes. Right. So dendrites of one cell, one neuron, and the dendrites of the other, right? Those make the synapse. Okay. So it is a junction between two neurons, and it is the region where the impulse travels, it is transferred from one neuron to the other. Right, so what does the synapse look like? I'll just put the image up here, and then we can talk about it. Here's one image. There's another one. Get that as well. I can put this down here. Here, and clear up that space. Okay. So the branch at the end of one fiber is in close contact with the cell body or dendrite of another neuron. As you can see, right, the impulse is traveling from right to left. Right, these are branches of one neuron, and these are dendrites, and they are in close contact. They're not touching, but they're very close, as you can see over here. They're very close to the cell body of the next neuron. Right, so when an impulse arrives at a synapse, there are substances called neurotransmitters that are released. Right, so they are chemical signaling molecules are released from vesicles, right, in the the sensory, in this case the sensory neuron, right, in the neuron that is from the neuron bringing the impulse. Right, so direction of impulse is from top to bottom over here. You've got vesicles. When the impulse arrives, the vesicles, they fuse with the cell membrane and they release these neurotransmitter molecules. Right, the molecules, the neurotransmitter molecules, they rapidly diffuse, right, across the synaptic gap, the gap between in the synapse. Right, and they bind to receptors on the other side of the synapse. So they bind to receptor proteins, right, in the membrane, of neuron on other side of the synaptic gap. Right? When they bind to the receptors, this initiates an impulse in the next neuron. Right, so from the sensory neuron to the next neuron, so the impulse travels, or from here to the next neuron. Right, there's a term for these. The neuron that's bringing the impulse is called the presynaptic neuron. Pre means before, and synaptic means before the synapse, right? And the neuron on the other side, as it's given over here, is called the post synaptic neuron. Post means after, so the neuron that's after the synapse.
It joins neurons.
Huh?
A synapse that joins neurons.
Will you be asked to draw neurons?
No, like it joins neurons.
The synapse is the connection between neurons,
Okay.
right? But the connection is not touching. Just keep that in mind. It's very close, but it does not touch.
Okay.
So we already talked about the fact that impulses can only travel in one direction. So what, right? Synapses help to control the direction of the impulse. Right? Why? Because the vesicles that control that contain the neurotransmitter are only found in the presynaptic neuron, and the receptors for the neurotransmitters are only found in the postsynaptic neuron. So only the presynaptic neuron can release the neurotransmitter. Only the postsynaptic sorry, only the postsynaptic neuron can receive the neurotransmitter. And so the direction of impulse will only be in one way, right? It will never go the other way. Okay, the other thing they do is, because this takes time, right? The neurotransmitter, the vesicle to release, to be diffusing, to receive, and to generate. So even though it's very, 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 very quick, in the order of milliseconds, right? But still there is a very slight delay because it takes time. Even on the scale of milliseconds, it takes time. And so what it does is that it slightly slows down the speed of the impulse. Right? So 2 points. And the last point is sometimes several impulses need to arrive before you have enough transmitter molecules to cause an impulse in the next. So sometimes, to put that in biological terms, sometimes several impulses need to be received to cause enough neurotransmitters to be released to initiate an impulse in the post synaptic neuron, which tells us that if you like there's a certain quantity, and there's a reason behind this which you will learn in A level, right? If you choose to take biology in A level, right? So you need a certain quantity of neurotransmitter to cause an impulse to travel forward, right? If it's not enough, if the impulse is weak, if the signal is weak, then the impulse will not go ahead. So sometimes, for example, you have like an ant walking on your skin. You don't feel it. Why? Right? Because the impulse, the sensory impulse that the ant is creating on your skin is not enough to reach your central nervous system for your brain to detect, oh, there's something on my skin. Okay? For example, any questions?
Yeah.
So we'll continue from here tomorrow and we'll talk about the reflex arm. Okay? And for
Yeah.
and beyond. All right, I'll see you next class.
Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.